From burning cities and hollow fields steeped in quiet devastation, to crumbling cathedrals swallowed by endless water and heavy stillness, to abandoned factories under ashen skies and mechanical ruin, these are worlds where hope is fragile, if it survives at all. They are landscapes shaped by war, belief, and extinction, places where silence carries more weight than words, and where simply enduring feels uncertain. These aren't stories made to comfort or reassure. They linger, they disturb, and they resist easy interpretation. These are some of the darkest animations ever made. Grave of the Fireflies. Grave of the Fireflies is one of those rare films that doesn't rely on dramatic twists, swelling music, or overt emotional manipulation to devastate you. Instead, it quietly dismantles you piece by piece, almost politely, until there is nothing left to hold on to. From the opening moments, where the ending is revealed without hesitation, it becomes painfully clear that this is not a story about hope, resilience, or miraculous survival. It is a story about inevitability, about watching something fragile move steadily toward its end, while knowing there is no intervention coming. War in this film is never framed as a singular evil with intent or personality. It exists as a vast, indifferent system, an invisible weight pressing down on everyone equally, yet crushing the weakest first. The suffering is unbearable precisely because of how ordinary it is. Hunger does not arrive with drama, sickness does not announce itself, and death does not wait for emotional closure. It creeps in through empty bowls, thinning bodies, and long silences. Seta's pride, his refusal to bow, to beg, to fully submit, feels tragically human rather than foolish, especially in a society that has already decided which lives are worth saving and which are acceptable losses. Setsuko's decline is one of the most painful portrayals of innocence ever put to animation, not because it shocks, but because it unfolds so quietly. Her games, her songs, her imaginary meals are heartbreaking, not because they are naive, but because they are acts of resistance against a world that has completely abandoned her. The film forces you to confront a brutal truth. Love, devotion, and moral goodness do not guarantee survival when systems collapse. Worse still, neglect. Quiet, unintentional, bureaucratic neglect can be just as deadly as bombs. By the time the film ends, the sadness has hardened into something heavier and more uncomfortable. A lingering sense of guilt and responsibility. It refuses to let the audience escape by blaming war alone, instead leaving you with the realization that these tragedies persist because of indifference, social decay, and the countless small decisions to look away. Coraline. Coraline is often remembered for its candy-colored visuals, its handcrafted stop-motion charm, and its storybook strangeness. But those surface details are a kind of camouflage. Beneath the texture of yarn hair, painted sets, and playful whimsy, the film is quietly one of the most unsettling animated stories ever made. Not because it tries to shock or terrify outright, but because it understands something deeply intimate and painful about childhood. Its horror does not come from monsters jumping out of shadows. It comes from recognition. From the slow realization that being ignored can feel worse than being harmed, and that attention, when withheld long enough, can become a powerful, dangerous temptation. At the center of the story is Coraline herself, a child who is not mistreated in any obvious or dramatic way. Her parents are not villains. They do not scream at her, they do not starve her, and they do not wish her harm. They are simply tired, overworked, mentally elsewhere. And that subtle emotional distance is what makes the story so effective. Coraline's loneliness isn't extreme enough to draw sympathy from adults, but it is profound enough to shape her inner world. She is spoken to, but not really listened to, seen, but not fully noticed. Her needs are postponed, minimized, or brushed aside with promises of later. The film understands how devastating that kind of neglect can be to a child, not because it is violent, but because it is invisible. The other world does not burst into Coraline's life like a nightmare. It slips in quietly, almost politely. It feels like a reward, a secret meant just for her. Everything there is brighter, warmer, more responsive. Food tastes better. Conversations linger. Every desire Coraline has expressed, directly or indirectly, is anticipated and fulfilled. The other mother cooks, listens, praises, and centers Coraline in a way no one else ever has. This is what makes her so horrifying. She doesn't feel like a threat at first. She feels like a solution. She embodies the fantasy every lonely child secretly holds. a world where adults have infinite time, infinite patience, and infinite interest in you. The film's genius lies in how it frames this temptation. The other mother doesn't need to lie aggressively or coerce Coraline. She simply gives her exactly what she wants. And in doing so, the film exposes a chilling truth. Manipulation does not always arrive dressed as cruelty. Sometimes it arrives as comfort. Sometimes it arrives as love. The buttons sewn into the eyes of the other world's inhabitants are not just a creepy aesthetic choice. They are a symbol of surrender. To stay in this world, Coraline must give up something essential: her agency, her individuality, her ability to truly see and be seen. The price of being adored is becoming an object. As Coraline spends more time in the other world, the cracks begin to show. The perfection starts to feel rehearsed. The cheer becomes rigid. The affection turns conditional. What once felt like care slowly reveals itself as possession. The other mother does not love Coraline as a person. She loves her as something to be kept, controlled, and consumed. The film's horror escalates not through louder scares, but through this gradual shift in emotional tone. The warmth curdles, the fantasy tightens into a cage, and Coraline in the audience realizes that this world was never built to nurture children, only to trap them. What makes Coraline so enduringly disturbing is how real this emotional arc feels. It mirrors the way loneliness can distort judgment, how the need to feel valued can override instincts for self-preservation. The film suggests that when someone is starved for attention, even manipulation can feel like affection, and control can feel like safety. This is not abstract horror. It is psychological, relational, and painfully human. The ghosts of the other children are not just tragic victims. They are warnings. They are what happens when a child gives up themselves in exchange for being loved without limits. Coraline's victory is intentionally understated. She does not win through brute strength or magical power. She wins by learning to see clearly, by recognizing the difference between real love and artificial devotion. Her bravery lies in her refusal to be owned, even when ownership comes wrapped in comfort and praise. She chooses a world that includes boredom, frustration, disappointment, and emotional effort because it is honest, because it allows her to exist as herself rather than as someone else's fantasy. The ending of the film is especially powerful because it resists the urge to resolve everything neatly. Coraline does not return to a suddenly perfect life. Her parents are still busy. The world is still flawed. But there is growth, subtle, believable growth, in how she relates to that world and how it relates to her. The film respects the intelligence of its audience enough to understand that healing does not mean erasing hardship. It means learning how to live with it without losing yourself. Long after the credits roll, Coraline lingers not as a children's fantasy, but as a quiet warning. A story about escapism, about emotional hunger, and about the seductive danger of being offered everything you ever wanted. It reminds us that the most terrifying traps are not built from fear, but from desire, not from cruelty, but from attention. And that sometimes the bravest thing a person, especially a child, can do is reject a perfect illusion in favor of an imperfect reality, simply because it is real and because it allows them to remain whole. Barefoot Gen. Barefoot Gen is brutal in a way that feels almost accusatory, as if it is staring directly at the viewer and daring them to look away. It does not ease you into its suffering or cushion its violence with sentimentality. From the very beginning, the film makes it clear that it has no interest in being digestible. Where many war stories attempt to balance devastation with moments of heroism, unity, or redemptive meaning, Barefoot Gen strips those comforts away piece by piece until only survival remains. And even that survival feels cruelly conditional. It is not a story about bravery in war or the resilience of nations. It is about what happens to human beings when the world collapses and keeps collapsing long after the headlines end. The atomic bombing of Hiroshima is depicted with a level of immediacy that feels almost unbearable. This is not history at a distance. It is not framed as a tragic event already absorbed into textbooks and memorials. It happens in real time, to real people, in bodies that are animated but horrifyingly tangible. The film refuses abstraction. Skin peels away, eyes melt from their sockets. People stagger forward while already dead, driven by instinct rather than hope. The animation lingers where most films would cut away, and that refusal to look away is what makes the scenes so devastating. It forces the viewer to confront the physical reality of nuclear violence, not as an idea, but as an experience that obliterates flesh, families, and identity in seconds. What makes Barefoot Gen even more disturbing is that this cataclysm is not the climax of the film, it is the beginning. The bomb is not the end of the story, it is the doorway into a far more exhausting, grinding horror. After the flash, after the firestorm, after the screams fade, the film settles into something arguably worse, the long aftermath. This is where Barefoot Gen separates itself from most war narratives. Survival is not framed as triumph. Living is not a victory, it is a sentence. The world Gen wakes up to is a wasteland where everything that once gave life structure, family, morality, social order, compassion, has been burned away. Gen is not shielded by innocence or narrative mercy. He is a child, but the film refuses to treat childhood as protection. Hunger becomes constant, gnawing, and humiliating. Disease spreads without regard for age or virtue. Exploitation becomes normalized because desperation leaves no room for ethics. People steal, betray, and abandon one another, not because they are evil, but because the world has narrowed to the most basic question imaginable. Who eats today and who doesn't? The film is unflinching in showing how quickly ideals collapse when survival is on the line, and how easily people justify cruelty when kindness feels like a luxury they can no longer afford. Adults, who are supposed to represent guidance and stability, fail again and again. Some fail out of fear, some out of exhaustion, some out of selfishness, and some simply because they have nothing left to give. Authority figures are useless. Institutions are broken. Even well-meaning people are overwhelmed by the sheer scale of suffering. Children are left to navigate this shattered society largely on their own, forced to make choices no child should ever have to consider. The film does not romanticize this loss of innocence. It presents it as a violent theft. Childhood is not something Gen grows out of. It is something that is ripped away from him. And yet, Barefoot Gen does not collapse into nihilism, even though it comes dangerously close. What keeps it from becoming emotionally unwatchable is Gen himself. He is not portrayed as a saint or a symbol. He is angry, loud, stubborn, and often abrasive. His will to live is messy and uncomfortable, driven as much by rage as by hope. He shouts, he lashes out, he refuses to bow his head, even when doing so would make life easier. This is not inspirational resilience packaged for easy consumption. It is survival fueled by refusal. Gen lives not because the world rewards him, but because he refuses to let the world erase him. That distinction matters. Gen's defiance does not fix anything. It does not rebuild Hiroshima. It does not bring back the dead. It does not restore justice or meaning to what has been lost. But it asserts something small and stubborn in the face of total annihilation: the right to exist. The film suggests that sometimes survival is not about hope for a better future, but about rejecting the idea that suffering gets the final word. Gen does not survive because he believes things will improve. He survives because disappearing would feel like surrender. What makes Barefoot Gen linger long after it ends is its refusal to provide emotional distance. It does not allow the viewer to process the bombing as a closed chapter or a tragic necessity. It forces you to sit with the consequences. The long-term trauma, the slow deaths, the moral erosion, the children shaped by violence they did not choose. History, the film reminds us, does not move on just because time passes. Trauma does not fade simply because nations rebuild or wars end. It embeds itself in bodies, memories, and generations. In that sense, Barefoot Gen feels less like a film and more like a confrontation. It challenges the way violence is remembered, sanitized, or justified. It insists that mass destruction cannot be reduced to numbers, hacked strategies, or political outcomes. Every explosion leaves behind lives that must continue in its shadow, and those lives are often defined not by recovery, but by endurance. The film's power lies in its honesty. It does not ask you to feel inspired, comforted, or reassured. It asks you to witness, and that is why Barefoot Gen remains so devastating. It does not offer catharsis. It does not offer closure. It offers truth, raw, exhausting, and deeply human. It reminds us that the real horror of war is not only in the moment of destruction, but in the years that follow, where survival itself becomes a daily struggle against hunger, grief, and the slow erosion of compassion. Long after the final scene fades, the weight of that truth remains, heavy and unresolved, refusing to be forgotten. Midori? Midori, also known by its original title Shoujo Tsubaki, is a film that exists at the very edge of human endurance, both for its protagonist and its audience. It is not merely a story, it is an experience of horror so intimate and raw that it lodges itself in the mind, refusing to leave. The narrative follows a young girl, Midori, whose life is abruptly and violently pulled from the fragile cocoon of childhood into the grotesque spectacle of a traveling circus of misfits, freaks, and abusers. The horror begins not with any explicit bloodshed, but with the sheer, relentless suffocation of innocence under the weight of cruelty that feels uncannily ordinary. Each character that surrounds Midori embodies some aspect of corruption or exploitation. The manipulative adults who treat her as property, the performers who oscillate between momentary kindness and abuse, and even the societal forces that allow such a world to exist without intervention. The genius and the terror of Midori lie in its aesthetic. The animation itself is a study in contrasts, combining childlike, simplistic designs with grotesque, exaggerated deformities, forcing the viewer to confront the collision of innocence and horror on a visual plane that is almost unbearable. Every scene feels meticulous in its cruelty. Every small humiliation, every minor act of exploitation accumulates, forming a tapestry of suffering that is both psychological and visceral. What makes this film truly harrowing is the way it depicts trauma not as a singular event, but as an ongoing, grinding process. Midori is never given respite, never offered protection, and never escapes the mechanical cycles of abuse and objectification. The audience cannot help but feel complicit, trapped in a space where they are forced to watch and understand that inaction, or even the very act of witnessing, is intertwined with the suffering portrayed. In the end, Midori does not provide resolution, consolation, or catharsis. It leaves you with the disorienting recognition that innocence, beauty, and vulnerability are perpetually at the mercy of a world that often refuses to acknowledge them, and that sometimes horror is not a moment but a life lived entirely under the shadow of cruelty. Perfect Blue. Perfect Blue is a film that operates on multiple planes at once. It is a thriller, a psychological case study, and a meditation on identity, perception, and the terrifying fragility of the self under public scrutiny. Its protagonist, Mima, begins as a pop idol, adored, framed in images of perfection, and yet she is trapped in a gilded cage of expectations. Her image, her body, and even her choices are constantly surveilled, manipulated, and judged by an audience she can never fully understand or satisfy. The horror in Perfect Blue is not external. It is intimate, invasive, and internal. As Mima attempts to transition into an acting career, the boundaries between reality and illusion, past and present, public and private, begin to blur until she cannot trust her own perception, and neither can the audience. This is a film that examines the human psyche under duress, how stress, trauma, and objectification can erode identity, and how obsession, whether from fans, stalkers, or the self, can spiral into catastrophic violence. Every frame is meticulous in its tension. The camera lingers on mirrors, doorways, and shadows in a way that mirrors the mind's own anxieties, making the viewer complicit in Mima's fear, paranoia, and disorientation. What elevates Perfect Blue beyond standard psychological thrillers is its capacity to make its commentary on fame, gender, and voyeurism feel unavoidable, almost suffocating. The audience is forced to confront how society consumes identity, how entertainment often masks abuse, and how individuals, particularly women in the public eye, navigate a landscape in which their own image is weaponized against them. The climax offers no easy relief. Reality and delusion intertwine so completely that resolution is both satisfying and discomforting, leaving viewers to consider not only Mima's trauma, but the broader implications for how we as a culture participate in the erasure and commodification of human experience. Watching Perfect Blue is not just an act of observing a story. It is an immersive confrontation with the fragility of selfhood, the pressures of societal expectation, and the horrifying ease with which perception can be manipulated, leaving an echo that lingers long after the credits roll. Angel's Egg. Angel's Egg, Tenshi no Tamago, is perhaps one of the most uniquely haunting films in animation, a work that challenges the very definitions of narrative, meaning, and emotional engagement. From its first moments, the audience is thrust into a desolate, dreamlike world, populated by crumbling structures, shadowy landscapes, and enigmatic symbols that suggest both religious iconography and the remnants of a forgotten civilization. The story, or perhaps more accurately the experience, centers on a young girl carrying a mysterious egg, pursued by a silent, nameless boy who seems both curious and reverent. What makes Angel's Egg so haunting is its refusal to explain itself, its commitment to leaving gaps in narrative and meaning, which forces the audience to confront the existential uncertainty at its core. Every frame is dense with metaphor and psychological weight. The muted, oppressive color palette evokes loneliness and despair, while the elongated, almost surreal architecture creates a sense of insignificance and vulnerability. The characters, sparse and enigmatic, move through a world that feels abandoned, not just by humans, but by reason itself. Their interactions are minimal, yet charged with emotional and symbolic resonance. This is a film that explores the fragile nature of belief, the quiet despair of existential doubt, and the way innocence persists even in a landscape that seems determined to obliterate it. The egg itself becomes a locus for contemplation. What does it represent? Hope? Faith? Fragility? Or simply the persistence of life in a universe that may be indifferent? Angel's Egg does not provide answers, and its darkness is amplified by this ambiguity. It is the horror of not understanding, the despair of confronting a vast, silent world in which one's place is uncertain, and the realization that some questions cannot be answered, only felt. Watching it is less about following a story and more about immersing oneself in a meditative, unsettling journey, where beauty and terror coexist, and where the lingering emotional impact is as profound as any narrative resolution could ever provide. By the end, the film leaves the viewer with a sense of awe, melancholy, and a deeply human recognition of solitude, impermanence, and the fragile, transient nature of existence itself. Birdboy, The Forgotten Children. Birdboy, The Forgotten Children is an animated film that feels less like a story and more like a lived experience, a slow immersion into a post-apocalyptic world where despair and hope exist in fragile, contradictory balance. Set on a decaying island plagued by environmental disaster and human negligence, the film follows Dinky and Birdboy, two young characters navigating a society that has collapsed under its own failures. What makes the film so haunting is its unflinching portrayal of trauma, addiction, and disillusionment, filtered through a visual style that is both minimalist and profoundly expressive. The animation itself, with its stark landscapes and sparse, almost fragile character designs, mirrors the emotional emptiness that permeates the world. Every frame feels as if it could shatter under the weight of grief it contains. Birdboy, part human, part bird, is a figure of quiet suffering. He carries both physical and emotional scars, yet he continues to act with a kind of fragile morality, a stubborn insistence on helping others even when everything around him seems irreparably broken. The children in the film, meanwhile, embody innocence under siege. They are abandoned, exploited, or left to navigate a landscape poisoned by human neglect. The darkness in Birdboy is not derived from spectacle or gore, but from the suffocating inevitability of societal failure, the way systems collapse and leave those most vulnerable entirely unprotected. Each act of kindness is fragile, each moment of joy fleeting, and the film asks the viewer to consider the human cost of apathy, corruption, and environmental neglect. There is a lyricism to the despair, however, a quiet beauty in how the film portrays resilience and small gestures of care amidst ruin. By the end, the audience is left with a dual sense of grief and awe. Grief for the irretrievable losses the characters endure, and awe at the small, almost miraculous persistence of hope and humanity, even in a world that seems designed to crush it. It is a film that lingers long after viewing in the mind and heart, prompting reflection on what it means to survive, to care, and to retain compassion when everything seems broken. Number 9. Number 9 is a film that operates in the shadowy intersection of post-apocalyptic despair and philosophical inquiry, combining a bleak narrative with an almost meditative reflection on memory, identity, and the meaning of existence. Set in a world devoid of human life, populated by small, ragdoll-like beings, the film follows its titular character, Number 9, as he navigates ruins that are as psychologically imposing as they are physically decayed. What makes Number 9 exceptionally dark is its unrelenting meditation on futility and entropy. The idea that civilization, intelligence, and creation may be entirely transient, doomed to decay, regardless of effort or intention. The narrative is sparse, and yet every action, every small decision Number 9 makes carries philosophical weight. He explores abandoned cities, navigates remnants of technology and war, and encounters other survivors who each embody fragments of human experience. Fear, curiosity, aggression, and despair. The horror is subtle but omnipresent. It is the horror of impermanence, of witnessing the collapse of meaning itself, and of understanding that life, even when conscious, may not inherently matter in the grand scheme of the universe. The visual style, a combination of shadowed landscapes, muted colors, and precise mechanical design, reinforces the feeling of isolation and desolation, emphasizing the smallness of these beings in a world that is vast, uncaring, and fundamentally hostile. Number 9 is not content with traditional storytelling. It encourages contemplation, forcing the viewer to inhabit the same space of uncertainty and existential tension that the characters occupy. Its darkness lies not in external threats, but in the internalization of despair, the slow recognition that even acts of creation and resistance are fleeting, and that the persistence of life is a fragile, almost defiant gesture against overwhelming entropy. By the time the film concludes, it leaves a lingering impression of melancholy and philosophical unease, a reminder that while human ingenuity and morality may shape experience, they do not guarantee permanence, understanding, or resolution. It is a film that rewards reflection, lingering in the mind like a shadow that cannot quite be shaken, offering a haunting meditation on survival, purpose, and the impermanence of all things.